Hello and welcome back to Ground Level Theology, our podcast. I'm so stoked. This is part 2, guys. So if you're here and you're looking for the podcast and you're excited for our episode, this is actually part 2. Go ahead and go to part 1 first. But we're just going to jump right back into this. We covered essentially from in the beginning to 1646. No, we didn't. We started
Oh my gosh.
essentially after
The
Acts
abridged
and
version.
brought us to 1646 AD. And we're covering the Westminster Confession of Faith. We're about halfway through this document, but there's so much substance here that becomes the foundation for what happens
Hmm.
in 1776. And so we're just going to keep working through this, Dave. I'm going to let you continue because you were
Trying to be the guy.
introducing a next
Yeah.
section.
Uh, yes. And like we're like, wait, we're still on this one document. Why? And because the founding fathers, uh, most of them were Christian, and even the few
Hmm.
that weren't Christian, they were religious, and they also understood. We really don't have formal documentation yet. We don't have a formal government yet, but man must be governed, so we need something. And so they're working with this foundation, and so that's why we're looking at it. And so we've been able to look at chapter 20 of the Westminster Confession of Faith. We're looking at chapter 23 at the third paragraph of chapter 23 now, because we've discussed kind of like this is why the civil magistrate exists at all. This is their purpose, the power that they have, even the reality that Christians can participate in public office, but what they need to be doing if they do so, how to do it the right way. And now here is an interesting chapter. It's not the formal concept or title that we know of today as the separation of church and state, but using a different but a somewhat similar vernacular, the idea of the limits of civil authority in relation to the church. That,
Mm.
there needs to be some kind of balance, a safeguard where the civil authorities in existence and the church don't have power over one another.
Hmm.
That one isn't more powerful than the other, I should say.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
sort of limiting that tug of war game
Checks
so
and
that it stays
balances,
balanced. Yeah.
100%. And so the first, this is all one paragraph, but I try to break it down based off the scriptural references that are provided in the original document. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of the flow of thought. The first statement is civil authorities may not take on themselves the ministering of God's word and the sacraments, the administration of spiritual power, or any interference with matters of faith.
Hmm. Say it louder for the people in the back.
If you are the president of the United States, that doesn't instantly give you the right to just be like, I can be the voice for God and preach his inerrant word, like at my inaugural address necessarily. Uh, that is, there's a Mike. We're not going to go into all the weeds, but there's a lot that goes into our callings, right?
Yeah.
We didn't just like go to school for it, even though that helped. We couldn't just be like, you know what, I feel like being a preacher today. There had to be, we needed to have a clear calling personally. Like this is what God wants me to do. I've, I mean, honestly, as pastors, we've tried to do other things, and it doesn't work
Yeah.
out. And so it's just not, and it has to be validated by the church and outsiders as well that we have clear gifts. And so you don't just get to
Just as
show
a
up to a
random thing
church.
to make this a bit more practical, or at least so that our viewers kind of get a clear message of what this is saying. A kind of a contemporary example of this is the threat most recently that churches that do not engage or maybe promote or conduct, sorry, churches that do not conduct homosexual marriages will be under the threat of their
Mm,
tax exemption status being taken away from them. That is the overreach of the civil authorities in how the matters of faith and the administration of spiritual power is to be conducted. Now, that hasn't been done, but that has been a threat that's probably been going on for about 8 years now.
Well said.
Um, but that's sort of what's playing in here. That's sort of what's being said here. Yeah, sorry, that's just a little clarifying thing there.
Yeah, well, and they're also thinking like, let's go back to King Henry. That's like, man, the guy came out with his own version of the Bible to allow and disallow certain things.
Yeah.
Like, that's a problem. We don't want that again.
Hmm.
Parliament, I'm advising you, don't let that happen again. Uh, which is interesting. It says limits of civil authority. It's not they don't have any, but there's a checks and balances. That Parliament even has a unique ability now where they can prevent their own leaders from taking on more power than they have. And so they're essentially having power in the church, but preventing, the abuse of it. Like, so it's not like they're saying like who they can appoint as pastors, but they definitely can use their power to be like, nope, you're a representative. You don't just get to walk into that church just because you're a representative in that area.
Yeah.
It's very good to have that. But they also say this in light of this, nevertheless, it is the duty of civil authorities to protect the church
Mm.
of our Lord without giving preference to any denomination of Christians, so that every person with church affiliations or duties will be able to function with complete and unquestioned freedom, since Jesus Christ has directed the establishment of regular government and discipline in his church. No law, oh, this is a kicker. This is going to make some people
Mm.
mad. No law of any civil government should interfere with, abridge, or hinder the proper exercise of church government among the voluntary members of Christian denominations acting in accordance with their own professed beliefs. It is the duty of civil authorities to protect the person and good name of everyone so that none are abused, injured, or insulted on account of religious faith or lack of it. I'd like to give two examples of how I've seen this done well and done poorly,
Okay. Yeah.
depending on the individual. Uh, with Grace Bible Church, with John MacArthur, in your neck of the woods,
Hmm.
some would argue that the government saying you can't meet because of COVID, it, some argued that this is an interfering with, abridging, or hindering of the proper exercise of church government among voluntary members. People are volunteering to still meet. We're not
Yeah,
making
absolutely.
anybody come. We're not making anybody violate their conscience or health safety by coming.
You know,
But
it's funny.
you,
I
when
was
you tell
thinking
us
that
yes or
exact same
no,
thing.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
when I think I've seen it done poorly.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, in the sense of like, you are getting in their way. However, there are times like, what do we do when there are certain denominations, certain, like, and I'm thinking cults
Yeah.
that end up abusing, injuring people and are or insulted on account of religious faith or lack of it. Where like, like Westboro Baptist, where we're like,
Yeah.
God gave us IEDs to blow up gays. It's like that is
Yeah.
violent language.
Yeah.
Or even kind of like what was going on with like Charles Manson and like Waco and all that, where that's not Christianity. Let's say that's not necessarily a particular religion. However, it is a cult, and cults fall under that religious umbrella. It's they are devoted. They have a particular worldview, a mindset, a lifestyle. But it was an abuse of power, manipulative, and so having maybe not all the ways the government gets involved and solves all those problems are okay. I'm not going to even argue for or against that, but I am saying that there is some, they do have some jurisdiction where it's like it's not happening at St. Paul's Church, but if I suddenly showed up on a Sunday morning and I said like almost like the equivalent of like jihad, of like we need to get rid of the infidel. If
Yeah.
you go out into the world and you find people that if they don't believe in Jesus, they must die. Like I think the government, like even like the local police, they would have a precedent to be like, this guy's off the chain, and he's gonna cause people to do dangerous things. And so that's not the government like overstepping at that point.
Yeah.
But it would be if I'm just doing like if they came in there like, oh my gosh, they're doing the Lord's Supper, shut the door. Like that
Yeah,
that would
this statement is I mean you could almost just quote this and then just call it
be
an episode.
yeah, drop the mic, just drop the
It's like
bomb
that
right there
that
about
sort of just
separation.
answered it right there.
Right. And again, showing our hand, right? What we're trying to
Yeah.
what has been labeled separation of church and state was never, you know, to be like they're so separate. Like separation as in like there is no place for either. There's no like separation implies that there is no relationship with the two.
Yeah.
However, there actually is a very clear relationship, and there should be a relationship between the two. It's
Hmm.
just they need to stay in their right lane, the correct lane. Um,
I mean, distinctly absent here, as we're seeing it laid out, is that the church is you know, not to be participating in the governmental authorities and actions.
yeah, like
If in
yeah,
fact it almost phrases it as, if you want to do it, if you want to get into politics, which was a lot harder back then because you had to be a noble and all that other stuff, but if you want to get into it, you're allowed to, right?
yeah.
um, but distinctly absent is the idea the church is not to be in politics.
It's
I mean,
like
that's
yeah, you call 911. You don't like necessarily call me if someone's breaking into your home.
yeah.
You call the government. Uh, like that's
Yeah.
just like that's how it's supposed to be. Like you have a reason for both of those. However, you shouldn't call 911 if it's like something that's supposed to be handled in the church.
Hmm.
You don't call 911 because like, well, my pastor said something that, touched my heart in a place that I didn't want to be touched, and now he's calling me to be, what Christ wants me to be, and that kind of bothered me. It's like, now can you go arrest him? There's a
Right. You
reason
can
why we don't go out starting arresting people in the
you
name
can
of
almost
Jesus.
hear when Paul says, like, hey guys, you should be able to solve your problems amongst yourselves without dragging each other to court.
Yeah,
You know. Yeah.
should. Now, but within reason, like also, you don't sweep abuses under the rug. Like St.
Yeah.
Paul's the same. If the law is broken, I have to involve the law.
Yeah,
Like
and
I'm
we've
not
seen
gonna. Yeah,
denominations fall to that with, I think it was the SBC, relatively
or
recently.
even the Catholic Church, right? With like, I mean,
Right.
just like
Yeah.
I mean, the Killers. It was called, or no, what was the name of that Netflix show? It's actually based off the Archdiocese in Baltimore, Maryland. Here,
Oh
I think it
man.
was called not the. Was it the Killers or?
I'd
I'm
have
so
to
bad
look it
about
up.
this. My wife watches documentaries. I'm horrible about it.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, just there are times in which the church, seeking to judge for themselves and resolve the matters within themselves, is actually covering up illegal activity that should be brought
mhm.
to light. And so we do see that in I was just
Or
bringing up I think it was the SBC with
yeah.
Albert Moeller.
Oh,
um,
right,
but
right.
but I mean, very nobly, well, I shouldn't
Reset.
say he, but they hired a third party to investigate and bring all of that stuff to light, so that they can start to work back into um, blamelessness, right?
Right.
Because that was an overreach that was before him, and he wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that we reset essentially. And
Yeah.
I say we, but I'm not really part of the Baptist, but it just
No. No,
you
but I
can
know what you
see,
mean. Like,
yeah, you can see that his heart was that something had gone wrong, and he has to do the hard work of uncovering it and having to work through all the damage that was done so that
yeah.
good can come back up from it.
Well, and we and other people were able to learn from their mistake almost, where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
like this is a good way to like they handle it, like that was a good way to handle it. So if anything ever happens, like we can do it. And even like
Oh
I think
yeah.
of like and also an old example of like abuse of like Christians getting in, not like getting involved, like you're getting involved in things that you're not supposed to get involved in. Maybe like the idea of like the Crusades, certain aspects of
Yeah.
the Crusades, where you it's not that like Christians can join public office. There are times where Christians, according to the New Testament, may wage war for just and necessary occasions. But like, so it's not saying you're a Christian, you can't wield a sword.
Hmm.
However, it's like, but how am I supposed to wield that sword? And that is a precedent. Here's another big thing, kind of going back to the John MacArthur idea of Grace
Okay.
Bible Church.
Yeah.
The third sentence of the third paragraph
Okay.
of the Westminster Confession. It is also, this is the magistrate, this is like their limited civil authority. It is also their duty to see to it that all religious and ecclesiastical assemblies are held without disturbance.
Hmm. Yeah, that
And
speaks directly to it.
yeah, and how many verses? How many references do they give? It's not
That's
just
four
one.
right there. That's
It's not no Bible, and it's not just like one verse. It's four references. And I like if we really had time, goodness, we can't look at every single one of these references. So I really
yeah.
encourage you to like look at a free version because a lot of us will read this statement and go, this is the statement. Let's see how the Bible fits. And
Yeah.
we need to understand that they were going, this was the Bible, what the Bible says. Let's see how, like, what we're supposed to do fits.
Yeah.
And so, like, the statement that I just read, it's not like they had a statement and then they were trying to find in the Bible where they could support that statement. They were looking at the Bible and they derived that statement based off what the Bible was teaching.
Hmm.
So they had this understanding, hey, it's your duty that all of our religious and ecclesiastical assemblies are to be held without disturbance because Second Chronicles 19 says so. Oh, because you're supposed to do this because Second Chronicles 29 and 30 say so. It's not like they're like, hey, we want this to happen, and hey, we found this verse that says maybe it can. It's like, no,
yeah.
we're telling you why. The Bible. It's
Yeah, and
amazing.
with that MacArthur thing, it definitely fits. I mean, there was
Oof.
definitely an overreach that was happening there. We were calling it out. We were
Like their
obedient
parking
at the
lot, like a
start,
whole bunch of stuff.
understanding that, maybe there is some sort of an epidemic going on that might be mitigated through that. But at that point in time, we had seen a lot of things that were unnecessary opening up, and yet churches were being told to stay. And so I actually really
Hmm.
I was rooting for John MacArthur. We have our soteriological differences, but I thought he was an absolute hallmark for what we should be doing, and he opened up, and California wasn't so happy about it, but we were all
No.
behind him as a church, and I think this statement really backs him on that as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because like I wish John MacArthur would read the Westminster Confession of Faith, because and it's not that he doesn't, but I know like he doesn't affirm all the aspects of it
Hmm.
as well. But I think he would be like, "Yep," and that's why we did it. uh, yeah, kudos to
Yeah.
him. It's not those aren't easy decisions to make. It's costly. And then the last way that civil authority is limited is that civil authorities may not treat the church as a department of state or take on the role of the spiritual officers. Like that's like just like a big summary statement, if you will, just like a one-liner of like you have NSA, National
Yeah.
Security, you have Department of Defense, you have the ATF, you have the FBI, the CIA. I'm just listing all these government agencies, and it's not like, oh, we have the CUSA. which stands for the Church of United States of America. We don't
Yeah.
have a national agency. Like the church is not a department of the state where we now get, public funding and we need to have, all these like things. And at the same time, yeah, they don't get to take on the role of spiritual officers. So,
Yeah.
which is what that's what King Henry tried to do. We see this what the certain popes have tried to do, where they tried to, like, the Pope is trying to be like the president, and then we see what happens when King Henry is trying to be a spiritual officer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's crazy about this though is what I'm saying, and I can't say that this is actually what is behind their minds when they wrote this. That would be anachronistic. But what I can see is how this was missed in history following this. And what's
Oh,
coming to
right.
mind is just, I think it was Fidel under, his communist
Yeah,
Cuba. I'm thinking
Castro. Yeah,
of China, even presently. I'm thinking of the Nazis
yeah.
and their use of
Stalin.
the
Gosh, I mean,
Catholic
everybody.
Church. Um, those in those times, they were using the church for their benefit as a department under them in a propagandistic way.
Oh,
Now,
right.
specifically regarding Fidel, and I believe it was Fidel, and more specifically China, even now, they're using priests to gain intel on the people, and the priests are informing the government, which would make them a
Oh,
sort of CIA NSA. And so that is the government using the church as a department to their state. And so we can actually see this statement bearing out in the negative way in how it's not being respected later on in time. And I think that might be what the Westminster Confession of Faith is actually cautioning against, right? Because if you're being told what to do as a church, well, then at that point you're not really the church, you're the government, and
right.
you can be restricted, you can be told what to do, uh, if that comes to happen, and we do see that play out in history later on. But we're in 1646, so we can't say that
Yeah,
that was sort of the mind behind all of that with that in mind, but we can say that they might have foreseen stuff like that happen, and so this statement's
right.
absolutely necessary.
Yes, and that's why, and because we're going through this, and so everyone that's listening, like I hope, if not already, like you really are seeing, like this is why we're looking at it,
Yeah.
because this is a foundation that not a lot. It's not like people are trying to sleep on the Westminster Confession of Faith. I mean, I didn't even know of the Westminster Confession of Faith. I've been a Christian my whole life until my junior year at Moody.
Hmm.
I never even heard of the document. And then you read a chapter like this, and you're like, you're not trying to be ignorant, but like, yeah, where's this been my whole life? Like, I wish I had this in my freshman AP government class, in high school. Like, this would have been nice to have. It would have helped me on my papers and definitely helped me, involve my faith more in the public school setting, I believe, if I
Yeah.
had known. But like, at least I know about it now, and you guys are learning about it now too.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Yeah,
well, hey, the Ground Level Theology podcast is
happy to
taking
help.
that information that we
Yeah.
took on and we're giving it to you. So that way, when you have this conversation at your Thanksgiving,
Well, you know what? Chapter 23
yeah,
of the well, and it's so
you
great
can
because I
take
live in
them through
Westminster,
history of all
Maryland.
of that.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
and
funny.
so like I was like destined to like love him just like and so let me look at this last section. Everyone, you've been doing so
Alrighty.
good going through this. So we talked about it's really good trying to cover all their bases. This is for Parliament. So talk about the purpose, the power of civil government, the legitimacy of Christians doing it, the certain limits that civil authority should have, and then kind of like chapter 20, verse 4 of like this is how not to abuse your Christian freedom. Christian freedom doesn't mean you reject lawful authority. It's like, well, here's the duty of the people to sit as long as they're civil authorities and they're lawful civil authorities. This is your duty as the people under them. And I love
You can
it says duty, like meaning non-negotiable. These are things you ought to do. You have to do.
you can almost hear that ask not
Ugh.
what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Oh gosh. Yes. And I resonate with the folks that are like, man, it's your job. It is your job to help me.
Yeah.
It's like, and we see what happens when the government, forgets that they're here for us and they think we are here
Hmm.
for them.
Yeah.
Because meanwhile, it's like you're nothing without us.
Well,
You,
I think the
you
important
don't
thing
generate
about
your own income.
why we should do things for our country is that if we left it to them, they'd do a terrible job. So we just got to do it ourselves.
Oh gosh, yes. It's like now I'm ranting, but it's like the person that like calls to their city, calls to their state because there's a pothole in front of their driveway, and they've been
Yeah.
waiting months and months. And like, I'm just gonna fill the pothole in front of my house myself,
And
and
there's
then they get
there's
fined because they don't do it right.
what's so funny is there's
Like,
actually rogue people going around doing that. Now they wear ski masks and stuff, but like, yeah, I mean, we have vigilante fillers because
what's
our
so kind?
tax our taxes aren't going to what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
But that's kind of an aside. That's
that
just
is an aside.
yeah.
It's funny, uh, little levity. But the duty of the people to civil authority. Okay, what are
Hmm.
you supposed to do? And I'm just gonna. There's like a reference for each one of these. So I'm just gonna say the reference, and you'll have to look it up later. Uh, but the first one, it is the people's duty. Wow, to pray for those in authority.
Mm,
They started off strong.
yeah.
Your first job, what should you do for those in authority? You should pray for them. 1 Timothy 2:1-2.
So long as they're in your political party, right? I mean, if
Oh
they're
yeah,
the but
yeah.
if they're in the
No,
opposing one,
actually,
obviously don't.
no, no, no. Actually, I'd say if they're opposing, you got to pray for them all the more. I'm just,
Exactly.
I'm joking, everybody.
You
But
gotta
like,
pray
I'm,
imprecatory prayers for your
oh,
opposing
oh,
party.
uh, uh,
For those
everyone,
of you who
just
don't
just
know,
Google what that
imprecatory
is.
prayers
Yeah,
are prayers in which you wish evil upon them.
break their
Um,
teeth off, as David would say.
no, absolutely, and in our church, we have a monthly prayer meeting, and that is actually the first thing we do. We pray for
Yep.
our nation, and we pray specifically for Joe Biden as well. We do believe that God put him in authority, um, and we ought to
Hmm.
pray for him. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the best thing that we could hope for is he becomes a devout Christian that
I mean,
just
that'd be the
coin
best thing. Yeah,
flips.
for
Yeah,
him.
and so why would you not be praying for him?
Yeah, and it forces you. Like when you try to love your enemies, you
Hmm.
disagree with them. It's like pray for them.
Yeah.
Like it's non-negotiable. You're told 1 Timothy 2:1-2, read it. It is your job to pray for those who are in authority.
Hmm.
It's also your job to honor them.
Hmm.
That's 1 Peter 2:17, almost like honoring your father and mother. That there is a baseline, a level of respect by the nature of their office. That you got to take it with a grain of salt, but you're still going to hear. You're going to listen to the advice of a doctor, even if they're not your personal doctor, over just some guy on the street. Because even though you've never met him, even though he's not your original doctor, he's still a doctor.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain level that just immediately that title grants and they can assume. And so you are within reason to honor them. This is a big thing.
Hmm.
This third one's a big thing, y'all. You don't see it, but I see it. The duty of the people to civil authority to pay them taxes and whatever is owed them.
I don't
We
like the
don't.
Westminster Confession of Faith
I don't.
anymore. I'm just
I,
kidding.
I know, right? And and boy, I tell you, because you think
Yeah.
about like we're gonna get to the Revolutionary War, like what
Yep.
started it? What started like taxes, right?
Taxes.
Unlawful tax. Well, unlawful
Yeah.
taxes. We talk
Yeah.
about lawful civil authority, unlawful civil authority.
We talk
Here we're talking
about
about lawful taxes.
yeah.
You pay them
And
taxes
taxes are
whatever
good.
them.
Yeah.
They
And
are.
yeah. And Jesus paid taxes. I mean, there's one of the things that ought we pay taxes to Caesar since Yahweh is our king.
Mm-hmm.
Whose face is on the coin? Give it to him, and then also give yourself to God because you bear His image. Yeah,
Yep.
we ought to be. I mean, yeah, we're part of the church, but we also got to be paying our taxes. So yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Exactly. 100%. Uh, and that's Romans 13:6-7. Then another line, you are to obey their lawful commands. Thank you
Hmm.
for the language. Lawful commands, and to be subject to them for conscience's sake. Ah, here's our word conscience, Mike.
Yep. The
Oh,
limiter, the
yes,
great
the
limiter.
limiter. It's true. Uh, and so you listen to them, and then this is why maybe folks that maybe didn't side with John MacArthur, and they might not have known of the one line that says, hey, they're supposed to make sure we're never disturbed. They might have, for their conscience sake, are like,
Yeah.
hey, this is temporary. We're trying to be at peace. And, conscience wise, we're not going to try to step on any toes. You got to be careful with that. I'm not trying to read anything in and spread what that whole definition means. But we do want to take conscience somewhat into consideration. Uh,
Yeah, I'm just thinking, man, I wish some people, I've seen a lot of those like TikToks and YouTube videos of, body cams by cops, and it's
oh,
like
right.
they walk up to the car and the person is not only nasty but extremely uncooperative. It's like, why'd you pull me over? I pulled you over because you were speeding. Can I see your license and registration? I'm a sovereign citizen. I don't have to provide you anything. And it's like, man, you should be working with those that are protecting you. It's like,
Right.
so long as they're being lawful. We all know we've all been pulled over. If some of you haven't, fantastic, but we've all been pulled over. We got to provide our information,
Yep.
run through the motions because he wants to go back to his day.
Yeah,
Like,
correct.
he doesn't
Like,
want to pull you over. He would love to be back at the station, or he would love to do other things, but you are also ruining his day.
right. And we can't say like there aren't unlawful civil authorities. We've
Right.
seen abuse of power.
Hmm.
However, you don't get to yell at him when he is being lawful, and you are the one that isn't.
Yeah.
If you're breaking the law, then he's now doing his job as what was instituted by God, right? Let's go
Yeah.
like you have the first paragraph where it's a divine institution by God. That way it maintains the peace and security of the people. And that's what he's doing. You're mad at him for like the hypothetical. You're mad at him for pulling you over because you're speeding, but he might be thinking, well, who knows? Because you're behind you're behind the family of five. They have triplets, and they're just trying to get home, and they don't need you speeding, being on their tail or
Yeah.
potentially running into them. So stop being
I
a
mean,
maniac.
if he has pulled you over lawfully and is doing his lawful duty, you should
Do yours.
lawfully follow his commands. It's
Yeah,
just
do your lawful
there's
duty.
there's a lot of there's a lot of clarifications here where, of course, one side or the other could go the wrong way, but as this is pointing out, you should be following the law. I mean, that is the
Hmm.
government that's been instituting stuff over you. You should be doing that. You should be maintaining order in a just society. Notice I said just.
Yes, you did.
um, yeah.
Good
So
point. Uh,
good one.
yeah. This next clause though is an interesting one. It states unbelief or different religious views on the part of civil authorities does not mean that they are to be disobeyed by believers,
Hmm.
including clergymen. Oh, that
This
officer
is
that just
getting
pulled me
into the nitty gritty.
like now we're making him our example. That officer pulled me over. He's a Muslim, and I
Yeah.
don't listen to Muslims
Yeah.
because I'm a Christian. They have a false faith. What does
I
this
I
say?
wish that was such a like dumb example, but I swear it's happened.
Oh, so many unbelief. or different religious views on the part of the civil authorities, meaning, hey, this president, is an atheist. This
Oh yeah.
representative is, Muslim. He's a Buddhist. She's, like whatever, Scientologist. Their absence of religion or their difference in religion does not mean that I get to disobey them by believers. Like, what are we talking? We're talking
I
about the basis of disobeying.
yeah.
You might still have to disobey because, like, maybe they're promoting something that's contrary to the faith. But
Hmm.
the sole reason for disobedience cannot be just because that you disagree with them.
I think to bring this
Wow.
even closer to home, an election happens and it's not your president, not my president. Like, that's
Right.
also not your practice of your religion.
But 100%. And it even gives that clause, including clergymen.
Yeah.
Uh, Mike, like we're best friends. Like we ask each other our opinions all the time. Now we're not making laws, but it's like we don't. That's why it's fun to do a podcast together because we don't agree on every non-essential.
Yeah.
Like for the most part, if it's a non-essential, when in doubt, we might differ.
Yeah.
Not on everything, uh, but at the same time, it's like I don't just get to be like I'm not going to hear what Mike says. I don't want to hear his opinion. I'm not going to respect him. I'm not going to trust his authority. Like simply because like I'm trying to give an example. Like I'm a Calvinist and you're not.
Yeah.
Like literally how ungodly of me. Like that's the exact opposite of how I'm supposed to be. And so it's really poignant, and that's 1 Peter 2:13, 14, and verse 16,
Hmm.
which we even hit on earlier, but it's applicable here as well. Another one is the duty of the people to civil authority. Uh, and this is like these are like extra clauses. So this is all one statement, right? We said unbelief or different religious views on the part of civil authorities does not mean that we get to disobey them.
Hmm.
And this is including clergymen in the legitimate pursuit of their duties as well. So it's not just we don't get to not listen to them because of unbelief. We don't get to rebel against them just because they have a different religion. And we don't get to rebel against them when they are doing the legitimate pursuit of their duties. Meaning, you don't get to rebel against the police officer for pulling you over if he's just doing his job.
Yeah. For the pulling over part.
Yeah, correct. Like he saw you speeding, it's his job, like, with discretion, but like to pull you over.
Yeah.
He would end up he would lose integrity. He'd be not doing his job if he just let you go.
Yeah.
Society would collapse. uh, and then they bring up the Pope. They're
Woo!
Protest.
All
They're
right.
Protest. Okay,
Here we
there we're talking.
go.
They're Protestants, right?
Yep.
No, and I love this. No one is off limits. They're not just going to tear apart the state. Okay, they're reformers, which means we love reforming, and we'll call out if something is wrong and if it's supposed to be better. So they have another clause on the Pope. It says the Pope, of course, they added of course, like no brainer. This should be obvious. The Pope has no power or jurisdiction over civil authorities or people under them in secular affairs. I
Take
mean, they
that.
said it,
I'm gonna send it to all my Catholic family. No, I'm just kidding.
bro. Dude, there's a
That'd
reason
be
why they have the First and Second Vatican and they don't have the Westminster Confession of Faith.
yeah, that'd be a really rowdy Thanksgiving if I did that.
Hey, I mean, I love rowdy. I mean,
I
Thanksgiving
mean,
is
as
just supposed
long
to
as
get
I have
rowdy.
my boiled eggs, my deviled eggs,
Your
I'm gonna
boiled
play that.
eggs.
I'm gonna play that devil's advocate.
Oh gosh, yeah. The devil? Oh, God. Like, dude, like I'm just saying, like they call him out.
Yeah, no,
The Pope,
absolutely. That's a
uh,
great statement too.
another line. The Pope never I mean, gosh, I love these absolute statements. The Pope never has any right to usurp secular authority, particularly capital punishment, in cases of what is judged to be heresy or any other fault. That's a contextual line as well.
Huh.
Because you had, think about the Spanish Inquisition
Yeah.
a little bit. Like, if you're not Catholic, you're getting beheaded. Like, that was,
Yeah.
and you
I
have,
mean,
like, yeah,
yeah, even in Protestantism, there's a few examples there.
unfortunately, yeah.
Overreach. Yeah.
Or the
And just
sandwich trials. I mean, we literally talked about
yeah,
it, you know, a
the
couple weeks.
man, the Pope is being called, but just to kind of contextualize this again, we talked about earlier the limit of government in its role in the church. This is the reverse side of that coin now, the church and part
Mm-hmm.
of the government, and we see that we're supposed to be in duty. That tug of war, again, I'm bringing that up, between the Pope and the King. Now the Pope is being called out here because historically, as we went over this in the previous
Yeah,
episode,
Gregory excommunicate. Yeah.
historically the Pope has overreached. There were times, and even the Pope has served as a politician in some respects, where he wasn't very much of a religious Pope, but it viewed his institution more as a king.
Yeah,
We're seeing
diplomatic.
here that the Westminster Confession of Faith is recognizing history and how that tug of war has been on one side or the other, and is maintaining the balance here. And so this statement here, calling out the Pope specifically in his office, but also calling him out in that he's not to be also the one who tugs on his side as well. Love it. Love it
Mm.
as a Protestant. Love it as a
Oh, of
Christian.
course.
Um,
Well, and like, okay, and they used the Pope like that was, especially like the thing about Parliament, magistrate, Church of England versus another context thing. Just we didn't get into it. A major thing with the Church of Scotland as opposed to the Church of England was they kind of wanted to step away from the papacy
mhm.
and like that understanding of like that hierarchical form of government, where because they were Protestantism, they're reading their Bibles and they're going, "You're right. Like the Bible says, we need government. Government isn't bad, but what you're doing and how you're doing it is bad." And so they're trying to bring it together, and they realize that where the Pope was just the immediate example. We could say president, a prime minister in another country, a king or a prince in another country. But what we're trying to understand is like the person in power or the people in power, if it's multiple
Yeah.
branches, they don't have this power. Like I told you what they do have power to do. I told you some of the ways that they're limited. But it's interesting that under the duties of the people, that's when we talk about the church. The duties of the civil authority, church isn't mentioned.
Yeah.
But the duties of the people, the church is mentioned. And I even want to quote the idea of Revelation. They quote Revelation 13 verses 15 and 17
Okay.
as one of their proof texts, like for the idea of capital punishment in cases of what is judged to be heresy or any other fault. And I just want to give like some context to that. And if you want to pull it up, you can pull it up. Like, I mean, I have it here. This is kind of
I don't think
impromptu.
I'm gonna pull it up in time. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, the idea, this is about when it's the second beast during Revelation, it's the appearing of the second beast. In verse 15, it says, it was allowed, this beast was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, meaning this is the second beast. So there was a beast before this beast. And so I believe that it was allowed, this beast, the second beast, I'm sorry not to confuse you. The second beast is allowed to give breath to the image of the first beast. That's a paraphrase, but to help you understand what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So the image of the first beast might even speak and might cause those who do not worship the image of the first beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand and on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to point this out as a very quick aside. They base this is their amillennialism. They base their argument for why the Pope should not be listened to, why the Pope has no power or jurisdiction, because they compared him to like one of the antichrists, like of the Revelation. They're comparing
Yeah,
him like the Pope. Oh, he's like the second beast.
yeah.
Like
I mean, we saw
I
that.
wanted to throw that out there. That's
Well, I
all.
think that wasn't that in the I shouldn't say things if I'm not completely certain, but I think wasn't that some of the margins of the 1611 King James version, or is that in a
Sure.
later?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, definitely
like
Martin Luther, right? I mean, Martin Luther
right.
thought the Pope was the Antichrist. Like, and if you
Right.
think about the nature of antichrists, like it's going to be rebellion, uh,
Hmm.
promoting practices contrary to the Word of God, which is what the Pope was doing. And so, like, you're actually learning throughout history, there's a lot of, lowercase antichrists, people and individuals that reflect the spirit of that
Yeah.
age, if you
I
will.
I think it's kind of funny because this is we're kind of going a little bit off track, but it is sort of
Sorry,
a
but it's
funny
just,
thing.
I mean, it was a proof
Uh,
text. Like,
yeah, the proof text, why they're doing it that way, how they're using that in history, how it is used in history, because I think I don't know if in the original edition of the King James 1611 King James version, maybe in a couple later, but in the margins they had some things that essentially the Pope was the Antichrist, and even in
yeah,
I believe in the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, it has been
yeah,
speculated that one of the two people being eaten by Satan in the bottommost um, ring of hell, which is in the cold, one of them is the Pope.
yeah. I know,
Because he's
right?
the
Yeah.
Antichrist. So it is really funny to see
Hmm.
that all
Yeah.
millennial kind of
It
aspect of it
comes out.
coming out, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's their theology.
um,
Like they're not going to try to take their theology out of it. And I
yeah,
want to give nuance. I want to, as someone, well, one, I hold to that view, but also like these are men that are like not just trying to like, you know, take the like they're reading, not reading their theology into the Bible, but like good theology allows you to have, a better interpretation. And so I'm just trying to show you all the angles of this, where these are
yeah,
real pastors. Like these weren't just like average Joe guys. These were men of God, pastors, theologians that then got asked by their governing authorities to
yeah,
tell us how we're supposed to do our job. Like, okay, we have a Church of Scotland, a Church of England. We might not even know that much about the churches. We need you, pastors in those churches, a part of that body, to kind of tell us what we need to, what role do we have, what power do we have in that situation. And so I thank you for bearing with this. I hope this was really fruitful because like this is at the end of the day the summary of everything we've been reading. The whole reason why I had us look at the Westminster Confession of Faith to begin with is right here, that we essentially learn that the church and the state are divine institutions.
hmm,
God created both of them. However, they have different objects and spheres of action. They're different governments and officers, like you think about Presbyterian or
yeah,
congregational government, whatever. Uh, and therefore, and so because of all that, while owing mutual good offices, they're independent of each other.
hmm,
And so as a good offices mean they're separate, and that the state doesn't have power of the church, church doesn't have power of the state, but they do exist for the betterment of each other. So what we're going to essentially get at, and this undergirds what the founding fathers started to think of. Okay, we need these two things to be separate in the sense of power, but not separate in the sense of there's no there's nothing related to the state. It's never discussed in churches, and
yeah,
that religion has no place in politics whatsoever. Like that was never to be the thing.
yeah. Well, I that's a really good statement too. I'd like the independent of each other to be clarified, not in its backing up of, oh, look, separation of church and state, but only in as much as it reinforces what we've been saying, that they are independent in the sense that a government is not a church and a church is not a government.
Yeah.
That's how they're independent, but they were both under God. And that's
Yeah.
what this whole thing has been about, right? And so we're not to like throw out essentially all that we've been talking about because we just saw independent of each other, but
Independent.
understand independent of each other in light of everything that's been said. Independent body parts, essentially, if I could use that
Mm.
analogy, under
Left
the
hand,
head of
right hand.
God.
Left hand,
Yeah,
right hand, but they're both hands on one body.
right.
Nice. I like it.
Well, we just covered a phenomenal document with the Westminster Confession of Faith. As we said, 16, what is it, 46 or
46. Yep.
64? 46.
1646.
1646. We've haven't even gotten to 1776. Mind you, this is all the foundation. One more foundational person that I think we must cover before we really get into our founding fathers. That is, before we get into the people that are going to be signing. George Whitefield. Now I always
Oh, I
confuse him
love
with
him.
John Winthrop because I
Don't.
always have to
I'm
like
just kidding.
I always
Sorry.
have to figure out which one I'm talking about because they're
Hmm.
such like they have strong names and they all
Yeah,
belong in that era,
it's
you
like a
know?
100 years apart, but like, and apparently George Whitefield had like a booming voice too. Apparently, he
Oh
actually had
yeah.
like a voice that was like a cannon.
Now, folks, George Whitefield, he lived from 1714 to 1770. That means at the end of his life,
Mm,
he wasn't even at the Declaration of Independence. He never got to see the United States of America become what it is.
wow.
But he was a preacher in his time, and his what he was preaching, which would become sort of a renaissance of um, revival, is the idea that salvation can be known and you
Mm,
can be assured according to the inward feeling that you have with your relationship with God.
yeah.
Now, this was sort of in contrast, we'll say, to uh, uh, what was his name? Jonathan Edwards.
Oh
How
yeah.
can we know that we are saved? You can't. You're either elect or you're not. We don't know who the elect are. We trust God that we are the elect. We can maybe look at our fruits, but
Yeah.
Jonathan Edwards had a little bit more of a harsh view of election.
He
So
did.
he
Like
viewed
visible,
that, you know
invisible
what, you
church
can,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, you can be, displaying fruits, but you might be one of the deceived. So sort of his theology and sort of what was pervading at that time was you can't know, but you should live out, and you probably are elect if you are living out your faith in that way.
Yeah.
And George Whitefield's coming in from the left field essentially saying, no, 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 no. You can know you are saved and you can have full assurance based on the peace and relationship with God within you that testifies to that. And so
Hmm.
he's making this individualistic. You can know you're saved apart from a pope and apart from anyone in the church that can tell you, no, you're not saved. I'm taking that away from you.
Right.
Salvation can be known individually. Heavy sense on the
Wow.
individualism took on this whole concept that just took on by storm across the colonies, and was this really novel concept. But even more so, a little bit more behind that as well, is that because of this, no one can tell you whether you are saved nor take that away from you. In fact, rather, you know your faith. No one else can tell you anything about your faith. And so this kind of built up the roots of faith as being one's own apart from others. And you can sort of see that this will take on essentially the fundamental foundation for what will be America. Because no one has the right to tell me what I believe in God will become, no one has the right to tell me who to believe in, whether I believe in him or not. Now,
Wow.
one of the
Oh,
people, as I said, this is so foundational. These are what our founding fathers were taking in. George Whitefield didn't get to see the Declaration of Independence, but you know who was there? The founding fathers. In fact, Benjamin Franklin would
yes.
routinely go to his Sunday services, and he said that he couldn't stay away. He had to go listen to George Whitefield because he was such a
Yeah.
remarkable speaker that in fact he felt compelled when it came time to the offering, when the dish was being essentially passed around, to put his wallet on it, give everything he had to the offering plate. And unfortunately, there were times when he knew he would do that, but he couldn't stop himself, that he would not take his wallet. So he wouldn't give his
Yeah.
money. So he
Oh, that's
would
funny.
leave his wallet at home and go. But even then, when the time came around, he would find people in the congregation that he knew and beg them for money so that he could put it in the plate. So it didn't even work because he ended up owing people because he would beg for money.
That's so
Now,
funny.
and now I say that, and that's sort of a fun fact, but it's a true fact, right? We have
Yeah.
Benjamin Franklin, the deist, the guy who's supposedly atheist and doesn't know God or anything. He's the one that can't not go to George Whitefield, listen to his sermon, and take in these ideas. And what is George Whitefield preaching? But that you can know salvation. No one can take that away from you. Faith
Mhm.
is individualistically known, and then no one has the right to tell you what to believe. That's going to come out.
Wow.
That's going to come out in what we think of this, in how we answer this question.
And it and I'm so glad you said that. Well, like even at RTS, we have a hallway, and on both sides of the hallway, uh, one side has pictures of all of our faculty, and then on the other side, kind of has like the founding fathers, if you will, of the Reformed faith. And so you kind of have like an illustration of like Augustine, then you have Thomas Aquinas, then you have Martin Luther, you have John Calvin, and you keep going down the line. And then you have, Jonathan Edwards. And
Mhm.
then the last one is our boy, George Whitefield.
Yep.
And it's interesting, like, you mentioned Ben Franklin's a deist. People asked Ben Franklin, like, why do you go see George Whitefield? Like, do you really believe that? Like, why do you go and listen to him? Do you really believe that? And Ben Franklin actually responded, uh, no, I don't. Not everything, but he does.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, what a line. And so, like, that's even like more of a precedent for like us as like pastors, and then like even Christians in general as well, where it's like, press into it. This is Ben Franklin, government official. He's one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He's on the $100 bill. Goodness, you want to have a lot of Benjamins in your pocket. And he's the guy that could say about George Whitefield that even though I don't necessarily believe everything he's saying all of the time, I have enough precedent to go simply because he does. Like he believes it. Like what a communicator. And he's preaching this message of grace uh, to this people. It's amazing. Like Ben Franklin wasn't going, "Hey, you need to stop doing this," because like separation of church and state. Why is Ben Franklin even going? Like, how dare he? Like, you shouldn't be going to
Yeah,
church. You're supposed to keep that separate. Uh,
and
so
that's just really to really just hound the point. You know, it they were taking their views, they were taking their concepts that they would make in the Declaration of Independence, and um how to think of that, like how to make a new government. They were taking
mhm.
that and they were running with it, and they were building it off of these common documents, but also people like George Whitefield. They were taking it from like the Westminster Confession of Faith, but actually also the preachers of their day. And
Correct.
so I actually want to, unfortunately I can't make this any bigger. Can I? Hold on. I want to, oh yeah, here we go. Sorry, I didn't tell Dave about this, but since this
It's
was on
all
the
good.
topic, I always love to bring this up. This is actually a coin designed by Benjamin Franklin. This is Benjamin Franklin's Great Seal, and I
Oh,
wanna
what?
bring this up. I can't make it too much bigger, but I will describe it for those that are on Spotify. Now, on the outside here, it
Yeah,
says,
the perimeter.
rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it.
Mind
Oh, I
you,
need a t-shirt.
taxation, all that stuff, they're going against being overly taxed and all that stuff. And so they did view them as tyrants. So rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. You're
Oh, I
telling
need
me
a
Benjamin
t-shirt.
Franklin the deist
Oh,
made this
yes.
and offered this to be our first coins as the United States of
Wow.
America? Yes. All right, so we have that phrase there. You might be thinking, okay, whatever. Maybe God in the deist sense. Well, let's talk about the picture here in the center that he decided would be good. Well,
Hmm.
here we seem to have some sort of a war or something going on. Well, if you really take a look at this, you'll see there's an army that seems to be drowning in some water, and then there's a
Wow.
people up here safe on the ridge that sort of have a lot of people behind them, in fact. And then here in the center, sort of looking like a little bit of an eye, is actually a flame. Benjamin Franklin is depicting the Exodus and that God is actually wiping out
Holy
the
moly.
the Egyptians. And here off to the side in safety is Israel. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. That was his
Oh my
that was his
gosh.
proposed seal.
Dude.
So
And they're
when
like,
we
we're out
talk,
of Egypt, England, and now we're
yeah,
here. So in the promised land.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Wow.
so, guys, when I tell you,
It's cool.
I mean, yes, I will always clarify the United States is not a Christian nation. But when I tell you that we are founded fundamentally, our foundations, the very concrete that we are built on that goes 100 feet deep so that we might have a skyscraper, is Christian. This is what I'm talking about. Benjamin Franklin, yeah, maybe he was a deist, maybe all of that stuff, but he's in the pews. He's taking it from George Whitefield. He's reading these documents. He has the Westminster Confession of Faith behind him. He's stealing all of that. And then when he has the choice to make a coin, he's depicting Israel
Hmm.
being brought out of Egypt, and he's saying rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Yes,
Man, it's like
this is a
explicit.
Christian founded nation. And so, man, I just saw the time too. Whoa.
Bro,
I
like
don't
no,
know.
we're going. I want interrupting that.
I'm
That
sorry.
like drop the
We
mic though.
gotta.
That was like I have nothing to add. Like that. Yup. Like
Well,
I'm
all
all
right.
for
We can go ahead and stop this part here. We are now moving into the founding
it.
fathers
Finally.
themselves, because we're this was sort of a part of an under George Whitefield, who didn't get to see the Declaration of Independence. But now we're going to be working with the people that did get to work on the Declaration of Independence, did get to sign it, and were there. And so go ahead and join us in the next episode. We're just going to jump right into it, and I'm looking forward to it with all of you. So we'll just catch you there in the next one. Bye.